Okay, so the savants at Blue Park decided that rather than consolidate main plot information into their own relevant patches, they would instead attempt to leave a trail of breadcrumbs throughout the 2.0 series that we could then piece together on our own. And while I'm not opposed to this method of storytelling, what I am opposed to is the fact that most of these patches are not easily accessible to those who may have missed them, right? If you wanted to get the full context going to 2.8, you would basically have to just find a playthrough on YouTube and sit through that, right? There's no option in-game to view any events past 2.1. Or you could just watch this video. I'm going to attempt to give you the bare necessities of context so that Paradise Regained won't just seem like a mismatch of ideas and plot points that seemingly appeared out of nowhere. And I'm going to go ahead and say, just right off the bat, this is the furthest thing from a comprehensive breakdown of these patches. I will not be going into like excruciating detail on anything because that would take too long. Not all of it is relevant, and quite frankly, I just can't be bothered. No, this is intended to be a nice, short primer for those who may be going to 2.8 without having played all of the preceding patches or only played the main story. It's only going to be covering the material that you may need for context. Everything else, unless it's necessary for supporting information, I'm just going to be glossing over. Okay, so let's go ahead and just get right to it. Now, if you've only played the main story patches, the timeline of events roughly goes: post-storm, we are in Sao Paulo, Brazil, colluding with Zeno, where we are then betrayed, but not before being directed to Ushuaia, Argentina. There we meet Aleph, the warden of Comala Prison, from whom we learn that the Manus' base is in Antarctica. And that's it, right? If that feels pretty sparse, that's because it is. A lot of the supporting information has been offloaded as mentions and short little like blurbs in event patches, right? And like I said, I think this approach is fine if executed properly. However, the fact that most of these are not freely available means that there are going to be some blanks that need filling in. So let's go ahead and just fill them in, starting with 2.0. Now, I have already gone through 2.0 to 2.2 in a previous catch-up video, but quickly summarized, 2.0 and 2.1 introduce Grace and Anjanala, as well as build on their characters a little bit to varying degrees of consistency. Grace, at the very least, is going to be playing a significant role going forward, it seems. We are given clues in 2.1 and 2.2 that Manus is preparing for a ritual to revive the Sufferer, and are also given hints that something fishy is going on with Zeno. Additionally, Matilda's mother seems to play a role here. She's vanished, and it seems like that's going to be something in the future. It probably won't be popping up in 2.8 though, but probably something to keep tabs on just in case. We are then informed that a mysterious Erd that we have been looking for may be found in Brazil, which then takes us to 2.2 Stage Tropics, right? Now, this is a main story chapter. We're introduced to Igor and Moldir, the latter of which is definitely showing up in 2.8. Maybe Igor does too, I don't know. Igor hears the voice of Arcana from her ashes, which means she's probably going to be coming back, and in the face of an insurmountable foe, Igor chooses to cut his losses and defects to Manus. On Burton's end, she, along with Anjanala, meet Erd, who is now going under the name of Dores. Things happen, Dores is kidnapped, Lopera is mind broken, and the Sao Paulo Zeno branch essentially crumbles under the lack of leadership. However, not before we find out that Ushuaia seems to be a sort of staging ground for Manus, and we set that as our next point of interest. The next patch, 2.3 London Dawning, is nothing. It's a very good patch, very good story, but it is a past arc, likely set sometime following the third storm, so in terms of main story relevance, there isn't really any. Now, following 2.2, chronologically speaking, is Revival of the Uluru Games, 1.5. We have a whole last vacation between 2.2 and 2.4, which means a few months have probably passed. Nothing important is mentioned here, but it does set us up for Last Evenings on Earth, which begins with us departing from Australia aboard the Free Breeze, a cruise ship that, unbeknownst to us, has been commandeered by the Manus. Now, quite a bit happens here to the point that I wonder why this wasn't listed as a main story update. Ulrich and Regulus perform an experiment in order to determine storm resistance with different materials, and it's through this that we are finally introduced to Regulus's little thing that she's been yapping about since chapter 0. It is a record, allegedly special since it seems to be storm resistant. The Nukutai, an indigenous people from some islands in the South Pacific, have all been herded onto the Free Breeze as well under the guise of altruism, though we later find out that they were brought here because their spirit shells are important conduits for Manus' ritual. Grace shows up again, except this time we're given some hints that she may not be all that she appears. She has some skeletons in the closet, or to be more precise, she has bodies below deck, literal corpses that she keeps for whatever reason. Additionally, it's noted in a trace that she orders for the backup lifeboats to be maintained despite having the primary boat sabotaged in what could be an attempt to limit casualties. And finally, she seems to undergo some sort of adverse stress reaction after meeting with Forget-Me-Not, which seems to imply that she's hiding something. I think what they're going for here is that Grace is most likely going to be Moth, who is a spy for the Foundation. As a side note, I have heard people claim that the song she hums while she's gone full Elizabeth Bathory is the Phototaxis theme song. Honestly, I can't hear it myself, but I figured I'd include this little detail just in case some of you with keener ears may be able to pick it apart better than me, right? By the end of the event, the Free Breeze sinks and everyone is left on the water, and from there we are eventually rescued and taken to Argentina. But before that, we get a little bit of an intermission in the form of 2.5, Showdown in Chinatown. There's not much here, but we are introduced to a few concepts that may be important. We meet the Vigils Bureau, which is kind of a magic Interpol, as well as the woman who seems to be in charge, Black Ibis. They are probably going to be coming back at some point, but for now, probably not too important. We also learn that Matilda's mother is up to some really shady shit. Now, as to her goals or alignments or loyalties, we don't know, right? Will what she's doing be relevant in 2.8? Maybe, maybe not. But I'm including it here because it does seem like it's going to be a recurring subplot that may eventually integrate into the greater story. But for now, probably not too important. And finally, we learn that 5 relics in total have been stolen from Foundation control, one of which is a requisite material for Manus' ritual. The items that we know of so far are Anjonala's sealing toy, Hurrijan's reunion of the 3 sparrows, and Aleph's tear of Komala. And from there we head back to another main story patch, Folie et Raison, which doesn't actually have a whole lot, surprisingly. We've been rescued from the sea and dropped off in Argentina, where there is a bit of a gap between our arrival in Ushuaia, as Regulus, Ulrich, Batutu, and Barcarola are no longer in our company at this point. We poke around for clues regarding Erd and in the process run into Recoleta, who appears to have actually met her heading to Komala prison. But by the time we reach there, she is already gone. Recoleta had actually met her as she was leaving the prison, which we technically don't find out until the end of the chapter. Aleph has been in touch with Manus for several years at this point, and in his character story we find out that he's contacted Miss Grace, which gives us a bit more insight on what her deal is. She has been several different people prior to her current Kayla facade, which makes her corpse collection seem quite a bit more significant, and we are once again given clues that she likely isn't as aligned with Manus as we might think, as she does seem to display sorrow and regret over the destruction of the Nukatai people. Finally, we find out that Aleph has been able to cross the various storms by taking shelter in a Manus base in Antarctica. This is also where Erd is headed after she left the prison, and we're also given the impression that Erd isn't quite operating against her will, as she too seems to be seeking something and is apparently convinced that she can find those answers in Antarctica. We burn the prison to the ground, and Aleph gives us the keys to his boat, and we begin our trip to the southernmost continent with pretty much no backup. And that's basically it. 2.7 is another past arc, also taking place after the third storm. It's quite good, but again, not immediately significant to our main story. So with that, we are all caught up and ready for 2.8. Thank you to Chip, Pampa Aerostar, Bones and Apples, and Fructose Tolerant for being YouTube members, and thank you to Neo Suez and Chip for the 10 gifted subs each. It does mean a ton. And for the rest of you, I hope that this was informative enough that if you miss the events of the 2.0 series, you're not just going into this last patch completely clueless, right? If you manage to get the barest gist of context, then this video did its job, right? But with that said, thank you all for watching, and I will see you on the next one, alright? Bye-bye.